Hi, my name's Suzanne McAllister, and I'm with Interviews with a Friendly Vegan and also Vegan Spirituality Group of Philadelphia. And today I am really happy to talk with Judy Carman. Judy, thank you for being willing to make time today.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. So Judy is an animal rights, peace, and environmental activist since the 1970s. She's the author of the award-winning Peace to All Beings, Veggie Soup for the Chicken's Soul, which I love that title. Co-author with Tina Volpe of The Missing Peace, and that's P-E-A-C-E. Co-founder with Will and Madeline Tuttle of the Circle of Compassion and the Prayer Circle for Animals Facebook page. She co-founded Animal Outreach of Kansas City, which brought an end to animal circuses in Douglas County. She founded the Animals Peace Prayer Flag Project, which I think is behind her, if I'm not right, which is lovely.
It's on the door there.
Yes. She co-founded with Lisa Levinson the Interfaith Vegan Coalition. She assists with vegan spirituality with events and is a member of the Advisory Council of Sustainable Activism, which is a project of In Defense of Animals. And she received the Henry Spira Grassroots Animal Activist Award in 2014. So you don't have to memorize all of that. Her website is peacetoallbeings.com. So that's quite a biography. So you and I, Judy, met, I think it was probably about a decade ago when you were the speaker at our Vegan Spirituality of Philadelphia retreat.
Right.
And we got to spend a little time that day, which I appreciated.
Yeah,
so
great.
As I said, I want to spend most of my time today talking to you about your latest book, Homo Ahimsa. But before we talk about that, I wondered if you could share your journey to veganism, which, if I read correctly, is over 40 years.
Thanks so much, Suzanne. Yeah, I'm glad to share that story. I've been vegan about probably 25 years. I was vegetarian before that.
Okay.
It took me a long time to figure out the connection with dairy and eggs. And I look back at that and wonder, but it did. It took me a while. Mm-hmm. And it was about the time when I went vegan was about the time when PETA and some of the other groups were starting to do undercover videos. Wow. And show us what was really going on behind the scenes. But I think the picture of the lamb that's behind you is very meaningful to me because when I was about 10 years old, my parents, we lived on about 7 acres in Kansas, and my parents had bought these lambs, and I thought they were for me as pets, and they had some babies and of course baby lambs. I mean, you're in love, right?
Right.
And yeah. And so I fell in love with them. I took care of them. I spent time with them. I got to know them. And then one day I came home from school and they were all gone. My parents hadn't mentioned that they were going to be gone. It hadn't really occurred to them that there was any reason to. To them, they were livestock. My mother's uncles ran the slaughterhouse in Kansas City at the time, so it was part of the family, as you know, to some extent has been for a lot of us. And so I was, of course, heartbroken and beside myself and crying because they were gone and I didn't get to say goodbye. Mm-hmm. But it still didn't click with me what was going on until Mom put a dish on the table and called it leg of lamb.
Wow.
I'm sure she had maybe said that before and it hadn't clicked with me,
Yes.
but that night it did, because I had just lost all these lambs. And so I decided not to eat meat after that, because it was like, oh, so meat comes from animals. And I had never thought of that either. So, I mean, I think it's very common for a lot of us to have been raised that way. With meat is just a normal part of your day. And of course, my parents, it was totally normal for them. So I tried not to eat meat, and I fed it to the dogs and all that. But I got really sick because I ate a lot of Frosted Flakes and donuts from then on.
Well, I was going to ask you, were your parents okay with you not eating meat?
I didn't tell them. I just, put it under the table for the dogs and that sort of thing. So they didn't understand why I was getting weak and sick. So then I was kind of a quiet child. So I didn't go into it with them. I just did my own little experiment and decided, well, I guess you do have to eat meat.
Yeah.
And of course, the doctors were saying, you have to eat meat. There's something wrong with this child. She's not getting enough protein, that whole thing.
Right.
And so, then it took me until I was an adult. And this was back in the 50s and 60s. Okay. So I had never heard of tofu or vegan or vegetarian or anything like that. And none of my friends or parents, friends, anyone ever spoke of that. But when I got into my 20s, I started learning. So that, you can actually eat that way. And here's what you do. And I went to an Indian restaurant in Kansas City and learned a lot there. There were, I think, a couple of vegetarian cookbooks. I know that for you young folks, that must be extremely hard to believe, since now there are thousands of vegan cookbooks, but back then there were very few. Wow. But I grabbed them and figured it out, and then finally got smart and went vegan.
I'm wondering, in those intervening years when, you go back to eating meat because you don't know what else to do, and then you're in your 20s, was it that it never stopped bothering you? Or what was it that prompted you when you were in your 20s to do some more research?
Yeah, it just never stopped bothering me. It just didn't seem right. And yet, when the adults around you are all eating that way, you're going, well, I guess it is right.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel right. And that's that anguish that I think we all live with until we finally go vegan. And I think a lot of people, I guess you could say, find an inner peace they never had before by going vegan. And that's what that other book you were talking about, The Missing Piece, is many, many stories about different people and the peace that they felt once they went vegan.
Yeah, so, I love what you just said, if I'm hearing you right, that for you it was more conscious because you had that experience on your family farm. But for many of us, I think there is a disquiet, but we're not even conscious of it until something happens that now we're awake. And now the discomfort is very apparent, and then we do something about it. But you had to go through all those years of, like you said, anguish. I'm eating this stuff that I don't want to eat, but I don't know what else to do.
Right. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people go through that. And like you said, also have kind of an unease, but can't quite pinpoint what it is.
Right.
And it's physical as well as emotional, because as we know, when we eat an animal who has been killed, tortured, and then killed, we're taking that misery, that sadness, that torture, and they're mourning into our own bodies. And so when that goes on a physical level and we detoxify literally from that, we gain a tremendous amount of inner peace, even on a physical level. It's amazing.
I think what's really interesting about what you're saying, and I agree with you, is that for the majority of the population, not just in this country, but all over the world, we are or were eating a certain way and ingesting, like you said, the misery, but not being conscious of it. So all of this stuff is happening in our bodies, but we are not conscious of it. It's almost like until, say, you were born with some kind of I don't know, a defect of some kind, and then it gets corrected, like kids who find out they need glasses and they were terrible in school, they couldn't see the blackboard or whatever. And then somebody gives them a pair of glasses and, oh my gosh, that's what I'm supposed to be seeing. A little bit like that. So it's
I
an
like that.
interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, I like that analogy. And it really is an eye-opening experience and a focusing. Suddenly you're focused and you're going, and I've heard so many people say, why didn't I see it before? Well, it's because they didn't have the glasses. Enough information is just finally gets to the point, the tipping point, where you get that last bit of information.
Yes.
Like I did with milk, for example, and went, oh, yeah.
Yes.
That's more cruel even. Yeah.
So I'm curious, just because so much of what you do to me has a spiritual dimension to it. So, or is spiritual. Maybe I shouldn't say has a spiritual dimension, but is spiritual. So was spirituality a part of your life before veganism, or how would you describe that intersection?
Yeah, Susanna, it's a big, huge part of my life, spirituality. And I actually went through a time of when I didn't believe in anything spiritual. I considered myself an atheist for a long time. And but then I had a spiritual awakening because of a personal crisis that took place. And I went, oh, okay. So they kind of happened separately, but in reality, they were happening at the same time. Because, and what I say to people who say that they're atheists is, that's fine. I mean, that is, we all have a different take on what we're doing here, why we're here, what's going to happen after we die, all those things. But there is a spiritual impulse that is causing even atheists to become activists, because you are literally deciding to dedicate your life to a cause without any recompense. Nobody's going to pay you unless you're really lucky and get a job with an animal rights group. Generally, most of your time that you devote to animal rights is you doing that instead of going out and having parties or whatever.
Yes.
That to me is a spiritual impulse. It's a calling, a spiritual calling. And you don't have to call it that at all, but it comes from your spirit. It comes from your heart. It does not come from your head, where you logically decide, well, this would be a good use of my time. It comes from your heart.
That's
so, yeah, I think of it as a a very spiritual activity to do, even if you are an atheist. But for me, like I said, I had a spiritual awakening. And so I studied a lot, and I learned a lot about different religions and how they treated animals, what they said about animals. And then it became difficult to actually find a church or a place of worship to go to, which Lisa Levinson and I are working on with the Interfaith Vegan Coalition, trying to get that vegan message into places of worship. But yeah, so we've started these vegan spirituality groups, and in many ways to help people who, like me, needed to be, with people who have a spiritual look at all this, a spiritual take on all this, and feel their heart so strongly wanting to help these animals and feeling their connection to the animals in such a deep, deep spiritual way. And so the vegan spirituality groups are just a great way for us all to get together and find each other. And so, yeah, it kind of came together like this, I guess. But yeah, now it's all, I can't imagine thinking of animal rights without spirituality.
Well, if there was a Venn diagram, it's almost one circle on the other.
Right. It really is. Yeah.
And I'm just going to say this for people watching. Judy does a really nice job in this book of looking at the different religions and how animals are treated. So we probably won't get into that much detail today, but I thought that was a really interesting part of the book as well. So turning now to Homo Ahimsa, I'm just going to say for myself, I've always thought the term Homo Sapiens was a misnomer, because I don't think we're doing a great job of taking care of this planet, taking care of each other. We're doing a horrible job of taking care of animals for the most part. Yes, we have our cats and dogs, and I'm always struck when somebody does really something heinous and the person talking about it will say, he or she is an animal. And I hear that and I think, no, I think you've got that backwards. If we watched animals, for the most part, yes, they prey on each other if that's part of the food chain, and that's life. But in general, I don't think they have torture programs. I don't think they get enjoyment out of persecuting or tormenting one another. I don't think there's ethnic cleansing, from what I can tell. So I just think it's lopsided. It's upside down. So I wanted to ask you, when you wrote this book, and I think you mentioned Homo Ahimsa in Peace to All Beings.
Right.
And I wanted you to tell us, what do you mean by Homo Ahimsa, and what's your definition of Ahimsa?
Okay, yeah, that's a good place to start. Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word for non-harm, basically, literally non-harm. And you can expand that out, of course, to non-violence, loving kindness. And I mean, it's such a rich, rich word. And people who've taken a vow of Ahimsa are basically vowing to do no harm, if at all possible. So the Jain monks, for example, who've taken the vow will sweep gently in front of them so they don't walk on any bugs, and they wear a mask so they don't inhale any bugs. And so, they have taken it completely, as far as they can and still be in a human body.
Yes.
On this planet. But so it has, and of course, Gandhi took a vow of ahimsa, and it led to some of his great works. And so, but it's what I wanted to do was say that I believe that we are all Homo Ahimsa in our true nature, where we are not designed to be violent predators that dominate everything in our path, which is what we have been doing. And your reference to animals is so right on. I say in kind of towards the beginning of the book, it wasn't bears and alligators that got the world into the mess it's in. It was Homo sapiens, which means wise man. And we know from now 10,000 years at least of dominating nature and animals and women and people that there wasn't anything very wise about what Homo sapiens has done. And so my thinking was, we've got to completely shift our consciousness about who we are. Let go of this idea that we can dominate whoever, whatever we want to, because we're out of time, basically. We've done so much destruction and caused so much suffering, especially to the animals, but also to the trees and the environment and the oceans and all of that. And so I start out the first part of the book is why did I write the book? Why do we need to become Homo Ahimsa? Why the urgency? And so I list, like, for example, climate healers, their thoughts on it, the Living Planet Index, the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity Ecosystem Services, the National Academy of Sciences, and a whole bunch of others that are saying, you know, we've got just a few years, maybe less than a decade. And of course, nobody has a crystal ball and can tell us exactly how many years we have, and things can change based on our behavior. Nothing's going to change if our behavior doesn't change. It's the trajectory of damage is moving so fast down now towards extinction that we will not have an ecosystem that can support the lives of human beings on the planet if we don't change. And I say change, but my book is really about realizing who we really are. That it's not so much changing that we have to do as realizing we're not Homo sapiens. That was a misnomer, like you said. We are Homo Ahimsa, and open up our hearts to embrace that as our true nature. And once we do that, then our behavior is going to change, and we will then be able to figure out what to do to reverse all the damage that we've done, which is immense. And I think a lot of people are frightened because it looks overwhelming at this point. And COVID only added to that. You know, it was bad enough before that. And now we've got that.
I hadn't thought about this before, but I love that there is this, I don't know whether you call it title but Homo Ahimsa, which is like a defining way of thinking about ourselves that I think collapses everything that those of us who are really dedicated to this kind of work can look at and say, that's what I want to be, or that is who I am, and how can I live up to it? And like you said, not so much changing, but becoming, because it is what we are. But I love, and I wondered, did you come up with that term, or was that something you heard about, Homo Ahimsa? I mean, I just love the term.
Well, thanks. I don't know. It just came to me when I was writing Peace to All Beings that Homo sapiens isn't going to be able to solve the problems. And I wrote that book about 20 years ago, and things were bad then. They're worse now. But I was thinking at the time, yeah, I mean, Homo sapiens has made such a mess, and so we can't rely on that part of our thinking to solve these problems. I mean, no amount of technology is going to solve this problem, these problems. And so I came up with the term then.
Wow.
And then this guy, Noah Harari, came out with a book recently called Homo Deus.
Yes.
And I read that, and anyone who reads that book is going to go, okay, we're done. It's very dark.
Wow.
He's talking about artificial intelligence basically taking over and, taking our true nature away. And so that the hope of becoming Homo Ahimsa, he, I believe, is vegan, but I think his goal was to warn people, to watch out for what's happening in the world. Don't depend on technology to save us. But he's basically laying it all out there and saying, this really is happening. So
is he
be
the
aware.
Israeli?
Yes.
Author? Okay,
Yeah,
I know exactly who you're talking about. And I have not read that book, but that I hear what you're saying. That is he sort of giving up and saying, this is where we're headed?
I think he is saying the chances are high that we're heading in that direction because so many people are going along with it, thinking that this technology is going to solve the problems in the world, the environmental and psychological and everything. Take a pill and everything will be fine.
Yes.
And
so for the people listening to this, could you say his name again, just in case people want to look him up?
It's Noah Yuval is his middle name. Yuval. Harari is his last name. Harari.
Okay.
So
that's good.
It's fascinating. And it was a New York Times bestseller, and his previous one called Sapiens.
That one I remember.
Also,
yes.
Yeah. So I just felt like when I saw that, I thought, okay, I have to write a book called Homo Ahimsa because I have to give people hope that we have another path, a different path. And that is going to mean letting go of Homo sapiens altogether. Just going goodbye.
Have you
That's not who we are.
Have you sent your book to him?
Well, I have not. I have thought about it. I have not gotten around to it. I don't know. I could probably find him.
I think you can find him.
I think he teaches at a university in Israel. So
I'm pretty sure he does. And I know he takes a month off because I just saw him interviewed. He takes a month off every year where he does he's not on social media at all. I mean, he basically unplugs, and that would be a great time for him to read your book and meditate on your book.
Yeah.
So I
will do that.
I'm planting a seed.
Yeah.
So I wondered, I think you and I are both familiar with this, but perhaps some people listening to this are not. And you mentioned the 10,000 years ago, and I think what you're talking about is the advent of what we call agriculture. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what happened then and how it led to what we know of as the patriarchal dominator way of living. So I wonder if you could just say a few words about that.
Yes, yeah, that's really important, I think. And I do talk about that quite a bit in the book. And basically, I call animal agriculture and war twins. They both grew up together. And what happened was that these dominator type cultures discovered that they, instead of hunting, it'd be a whole lot easier to get these animals into corrals. And then they could just kill them when they got hungry. But that through doing that, they learned how to breed animals and make them fatter and more docile.
Yeah.
And just through breeding. And but the whole push there was based on the idea that they had the right to dominate other creatures, which is a terrible, terrible idea. It's not a good idea. Like you said, animals in nature do not do that. They do what they have to eat, but they don't wage war. They don't, do all the things that you mentioned. And so it was something that Homo sapiens invented, basically. And then once they discovered that they could do this, this allowed larger and larger cultures to merge together and live in large populations. This allowed then for people who might have been just a chief of a small tribe to become kings with all of the privileges that go with that and the power, and priests also to gain tremendous power over the people. So now they didn't have to grow food or anything. They could just sit around and figure out ways to get more land, more animals, and women and slaves. And so, and they basically began taking over the world. And, we all know what happened in North America, and when the Europeans came over, all these activities were based on the belief that they could do whatever they wanted with other people and animals. And it's really it fits the definition of psychopathy, being a psychopath. And because psychopaths have very little, if any, empathy, and people and animals are theirs to use. And so this led to war and slavery and all of these things that did not exist before that, according to a lot of anthropologists. And these are theories, but it does appear that is when populations started to soar in numbers because of the ability to contain all these animals and eat them when you wanted to.
It sounds like it was the genesis of the patriarchy dominator model, which, if animal agriculture doesn't fit that to a T, I don't know what does.
Right.
And then all the other things that came with that, which is domination of women, slavery, etc. So thank you for that. So I guess one of my questions is, how do we, and it's probably answered in your book, which is why you wrote it, but how do we start educating people about this? Because I think when people look at that and say, we didn't start out this way. It's been 10,000 years, which is a long time, but not in the scheme of things. And so there is another way. And my hope is that when people hear this and they start to realize, wait a second, if it's only 10,000 years and we really don't like the results, can we do something different? But my question to you is, what do you think is the best way to educate people about transforming from the patriarchy dominator model?
Well, I think there's many, many ways, of course, but one of the things that Lisa Levinson and Thomas Jackson is also involved in the Interfaith Vegan Coalition, and he, just an aside, he did the film A Prayer for Compassion, which everybody needs to watch and share with non-vegans, pre-vegans for sure, because it's so compelling. But anyway, we started the Interfaith Vegan Coalition with your question in mind. How do we reach these people?
Okay.
And one of the things that we talk about a lot, and it's in the book too, is the golden rule. Because the golden rule is embraced by almost every religion that exists. And it's embraced by ethical traditions as well. People who are atheist, they embrace the golden rule. I think it would be hard to find someone who wouldn't agree with it. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And it's just that it has stopped short before the animals, and it has stopped short when it comes to our enemies. And that has a lot to do with the dominator culture. And so by changing to a partnership culture where we see ourselves as Homo Ahimsa, partners with all of life, not dominators, then we see the light, we see the path ahead, we see, oh, this is why I have so much love for my dog, because it's in my heart and soul to be kind and loving. I know Silas Rao asks the question to audiences. He says, any of you out there, raise your hand if you would purposefully harm an animal, and no one raises their hand. And he says, well, then you're all already vegan. And it's a beautiful, beautiful way to say it's already in you to be Homo Ahimsa. It's in all of us, like the song says, and to be loving, to be kind, to bring heaven to earth, to be peaceful with each other. Nobody wants to go to war until the dominating governments get everybody all riled up and thinking, oh, they're our enemies, we have to kill them. But we all know in our hearts that that's not the case. And we've all been longing for this for centuries. And I believe that this is our time to rise up in consciousness and in behavior. And so it's really an exciting time to be alive, I think. And
well, I actually want to address your optimism, but before we get to that, there was a statistic that you have on page 36 and 7, which really, it wasn't a surprise, but it was a surprise. 95 male prisoners to every 5 incarcerated women worldwide, and approximately 80% of animal activists are women.
Yeah.
And I know that just from my activities, that there are many more women who are engaged in what we're doing. So I don't know whether you want to wade into that at all, or is that too charged?
Well, I think my grandson just had a birthday party, and all the boys were staying in a cabin, and the sheets were folded up neatly on each bed for the boys. They never made the beds. They just laid down on top of the sheets.
That's hilarious.
So I'm not sure what that means exactly, but
that's a cute anecdote no matter what.
The feminine nature of men has been suppressed, as we know. And we don't know for how many thousands of years, but a long, long time. And so men are suffering by not being able to express their feminine nature, their ahimsa nature, which in many, people, many men, it's considered weak,
Yes.
To be like a girl and all of that. And so, but the divine feminine is rising, and Amma, the hugging saint, talks about the rising of the divine motherhood. And she says it isn't about people who have had children who are mothers. It's about the mother in us all that is longing to come out and care for everyone that needs our care and love everyone. It's in everybody. And so the men have been suffering all this time as well. And but women, we're kind of leading the way. There's no doubt about it. And we need to stay really strong in that, because there's plenty of problems along those lines, as we know. But we're in a transition period, and we are going forward, and we're getting more and more of a voice as women. And we just naturally have this loving nature that hasn't been as suppressed as it has been in men.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we can help them, especially our sons and these young people that are coming along, and mothers who are, have new babies. This is a really important, I think, to help your sons understand that it's okay to cry. It's okay to love. It's not okay to step on little insects. It's very okay to lift them out of harm's way, and things like that need to be demonstrated to them by their mothers and their fathers. And so, yeah, and that I see a lot of that happening. So that's part of my optimism for sure. Yeah.
Well, that was one of my, I guess, takeaways from the book. Number one, I found it provocative, but I also found it inspiring and hopeful. But in the back of my mind, I was saying, why is Judy so hopeful? Why is Judy so optimistic? Because I can look around me and yet I want to be optimistic, and I make a decision every day to do something, because that helps me to feed the optimism. But I wanted to ask, but it's a conscious choice. Because if I look around me, or if I watch the news, I can get down, and not just about animals, but many things, the environment, war, the vestiges of war. So what is it that makes you optimistic for what's happening now?
Well, thanks, Suzanne. I think it's just what you said. It's a choice.
Okay.
To be optimistic. We can choose to be optimistic, and if we are, and if we hold a vision for a world of peace and ahimsa and love and veganism, we're going to move things forward with our spiritual energy, as well as our actions, which are coming out of the belief that we can do something about this. And so I see it as a choice, because it would be much easier to choose to just go, yeah, it doesn't look too good. And so, why don't I just go do whatever I want now and stop all this activism? But I believe we've got a chance, and that if we can really pull this off and really rise up in consciousness and become Homo Ahimsa and live by the golden rule that everybody really wants to live by, and bring heaven to earth, which is kind of a Christian saying, but I think all religions have something along that line of bringing peace to earth. If we want to do that, this is our time. And there's so many people that want to do that and are actively trying. That gives me hope. And then I have one chapter where I talk about some of the hopeful things that are happening that we can focus our minds on. If we get down from watching, a video, for example, or listening to the news, then we could switch over and you look up an animal sanctuary on YouTube and watch the lambs dancing around and happy because they're free, and listen to those stories and see how many animal sanctuaries there are now, and micro sanctuaries too, where people may just have one animal, like a rooster or somebody that they're taking care of, and that's a micro sanctuary. And just many things like that. All the films that are coming out, the dark hobby film to try to stop people from capturing the little tropical fish, and 99% of them die in transport. So there I went. Okay, so now let's go this way.
Yes.
But the film is going to help people understand you do not want to have an aquarium and support that system. But yeah, we have
and that's very practical too, which is inform yourself. And then if you feel hurt or discouraged, then watch something that is uplifting.
Right. So, the octopus teacher, for example.
Yes. We discussed that, I think it was 2 months ago in our film.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful.
Oh, to see that octopus go to his chest and just lie there, it just made me cry. It was like, can everybody please see this?
Yes.
And see that those are our cousins. That's our family, all the animals.
Yes.
And all of nature. Yeah.
So I had so many questions for you, but we would be on for a couple of hours. But there was one of the things that you said that really struck me, and I appreciated it. And it was that, and I'm probably going to misquote this, so you can correct me, but that veganism as a spiritual practice is not a religion. And I thought making that explicit was so important because, well, anyway, I just thought there are so many things that have happened in the name of religion that are not positive. There are many things that are. I'm not going to, put religion down per se, but for me, it was very broad. And I wondered if you could just say a few words about you making that very explicit.
Well, I think the main point I was making about it, and I like what you're saying too, was that if we call it a religion, then it's like we're saying, well, we're Baptist. You guys don't have to be Baptist. Yes. So that's just what I chose. I like the way they sing and worship and everything. Veganism is not like that. Veganism is ahimsa in action. It's the golden rule in action. It's universal. So, and another point about religion is that we aren't going to exclude people, if they're not perfectly vegan or something like that. We welcome everyone and we love everyone. And so it's different in that way because a lot of religions are pretty exclusive.
Yes.
And this is totally inclusive, not only of all people, but all animals and all of nature. So So in that sense, it's not a religion. It is possible to say that's your religion if you need a religious exemption for something. But as far as promoting it as, well, that's just my little religion, and it's different from being a Baptist. No, it's the same as Baptist, it's the same as Hindu, it's the same as Buddhist, it's the same as all of their highest values, which
it underlies everything.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Which I love that you have a chapter devoted to things that people can do, because I thought that was really helpful, especially if somebody is feeling a little stuck or overwhelmed, discouraged. So I just want to mention that to people who are thinking of getting the book. There's a wonderful chapter on things that you can do. But let's end. Another thing that you mentioned was that and then it was along the lines of what we can do as activists, or as just people who care about the animals and the earth. You said everybody has a special gift. And I wanted to ask you, what do you see as your special gift?
Oh,
putting you on the spot.
I ask myself that a lot. Well, you know what I think it is. I've looked back the other day. I was going through old files trying to thin things out, and I was finding letters I had written like 50 years ago on this same theme. And I mean, I didn't know the word vegan then, but it was all about, kindness to all and loving all. And I was writing to county commissioners and legislators and people like that about, don't cut the trees down because, and all stuff like that. And I just went, oh, well, maybe that's my gift. I just have this message that I have to get out.
Yes.
And
yes.
So I guess that's what it is.
And you've been practicing that for all these years, even like you said, when those lambs were taken away, and you knew, you started there, and it has gone for, and you probably were doing it before then as well.
Well, I know my dad was going to shoot some muskrats one time, and that were in the pond, and he thought they were going to ruin the dam of the pond. And so he was standing out on the back porch with a rifle or whatever, shotgun. And I stood beside him and I pushed him, which was very dangerous, but I was too young. All I knew was you can't shoot those muskrats. But I must say, in response to what you're saying, that it took me many, many years to just go in increments to understand, because there's so many programs that we all deal with in school, our parents, church, every part of our culture, and they've been programmed with the same ideas. And so it's constantly infiltrating your mind, and you're just questioning, but not knowing what to do. And I am so grateful for the animal rights groups that have sprung up since the 80s and helped us know what to do and taught us what's really going on. I know it was PETA that basically gave me the concept that animals are not ours to use.
Yes.
That was a new concept for me.
Yes.
And man, is that ever transformative to realize that, because, I had pets, right? Dogs and all kinds of animals, cats and horses. And I rode horses. because you are a human,
Yeah.
and you can tell them what to do.
Yeah.
And so that was really transformative for me. And I'm forever grateful for that one little statement.
Well,
And
I think each of us who is on this path have those moments where I think of it as waking up. I have my moment when I woke up, and we are incredibly grateful for whatever it was, a book, a movie, a quote,
Yes.
talking to somebody. And so I want to thank you, first of all, for everything that you've been doing. I want to thank you for being you, actually. I'll just leave it at that. But then everything that comes from that, which is most recently this wonderful book, which I hope others will read and pass along to friends, because there's so much in it. But thank you for making time today. I have so enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you better.
Oh,
So,
thank you, Suzanne. I'm really honored to be on your interview, and you are an incredible interviewer, I must say. You ask the best questions. It's just been such a joy. So
well,
thank
it's
you.
probably 30 plus years of being a psychologist. I learned how to ask questions. But
Right,
that's
and get
it's
people
not what
talking.
it's not what I'm doing these days. So I'm doing what I'm passionate about, which is this.
Yeah.
So
Me
thank you
too.
so much.